Welcome to another episode of the Alignment Podcast. Today we have our guest, Donna Brown, who's the founder of Cultivation HR, a fractional HR advisory firm that helps small to medium sized businesses scale smarter through people, culture, and growth. But that's not all. With decades of experience leading HR and tech functions inside of Fortune 100 companies, in the last 5 years, immersed in fast-paced world of tech startups, she brings a unique blend of discipline and agility to her clients. She partners with CEOs and leadership teams as both a strategic advisor and operator, translating business plans into people strategies that accelerate results. Passionate about building culture first companies where people thrive, she believes that when people flourish, businesses outperform. Thanks so much, Donna, for coming on the podcast today and really being aligned with what we talk a lot about here.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, and thanks for that warm introduction. I appreciate it. I'm excited for our conversation because for me, no matter what work I'm doing with an organization, it always comes down to you gotta be able to get the most out of your people in a really healthy and positive way. So helping talent thrive is the thing that helps me thrive. I actually just said that. I had a meeting with an employee earlier today. We were talking about a role change. I'm like, so how are you feeling about this? And he was feeling great and everything was going well. And I'm like, well, this is like my bread and butter because knowing that, I can help craft his voyage a little bit so that he feels like he's taking that next super juicy step in his career is just really fulfilling.
That's awesome. So you use the word thrive. What does it look like when, right? There's two sides to this. What does it look like when a business is thriving? And what does it look like when the people are thriving? And where does that overlap? And which things are mutually exclusive or not? And maybe that's a too much of a question, but feel free to answer that
No, it's a
however.
super interesting question, Jacob, because I think you have to ask me again in 5 minutes if I've changed my mind, but I think the answer is the same, right? People and companies thrive because there's high performance, delivering outcomes. There's clarity of purpose. There's mutual investment. The energy I'm putting into a company is the energy I'm getting out of a company. So there's that balance. And when you create those kinds of conditions for people to thrive and do your best work and you remove those barriers, so reducing the friction, making sure you've got good, clear processes, those are things you want for a healthy business, but they're also things that you want for healthy people. And when you really focus on that, the data has been there for a very long time. Some of the stuff got amplified during COVID, but the impact to top and bottom line business results for companies when they have people who feel activated to the purpose, that they're supported, that they're growing, that they don't have to go through a lot of bureaucracy to do what's important to them, all of those business metrics go up.
Yeah. What do you say to a business owner when they're trying to get the most out of their people, but instead of, like a coaxing coaching way of how do we help them thrive so we thrive, they're like wringing the towel as much as possible. What do you say to them? And is it even worth saying anything to them?
I think it depends. There are some people that are just going to be in their ways doing their things. But there are other people that operate in that way because that's what they've seen. If you look at how leadership has transformed over the years, there are a lot of great leaders out there doing great things. There are some leaders who could be terrific, but they're operating in systems that continue to reinforce those stale ways of being. And they haven't really reckoned with employees are not only looking for a paycheck. We've seen this, especially since COVID, where people are so much more advocating for themselves, right? They're looking for purpose. They're looking for growth. They're looking for trust. They want leaders that can help them thrive, not just survive. So leaders who are operating in, I would call, the old fashioned space, maybe the industrial revolution space, all of those procedures and little boxes and very tight job descriptions and where you are on the org chart, it is an indication of how much influence you have in the organization, right? All of that nonsense. But I think, here's what I would say to leaders who are maybe a little reluctant. Replacing talent is really expensive. So just look at it from a bottom line perspective. SHRM estimates that direct replacement costs can run, I don't know, 50 to 250%, depending upon the role. Gallup has been reporting for a while that voluntary turnover costs the US, this is not global, $1 trillion a year. And then you have the indirect things, right? Knowledge walking out the door, you've maybe it hasn't been direct in terms of training, but you've trained people up so that they know your product, they know your customers, and then you're just going to let them walk out the door because you couldn't be bothered to wish them a happy anniversary or ask them how their family is or whatever. These very easy, like low hanging fruit. You've got disruptive client relationships, team morale is going down, and productivity drops because then your remaining people have to cover the gap. So I would say that helping the talent you already have thrive, it's not just a nice thing to do. I mean, there are people like us who are altruistic and want people to have a fantastic work experience. But for those people that that's not something that resonates for them, the smartest thing you can do for your financial strategy is to start incorporating some of these changes.
Yeah, I talked with we had somebody on the podcast a couple weeks ago that well, actually, I say a couple weeks ago. His podcast is coming out, I think this next week or later this week. But he's literally written a book called The Employee Retention Bible. Um, and
Interesting.
in it, he talks about, or what exactly did he say? He said something about like if a company doesn't know the cost of turnover, like they're doing absolutely nothing to solve the problem. Like the
Yeah.
first step
That's like
to
the
improving
easiest
turnover is
metric
knowing,
to go get. Yeah.
yeah, how much has it costed us? And he said as soon as people know that, they realize, oh crap, we have to do something. Like it's irresponsible for us to not to do something because it's costing us so much money. And that's just with the dollars, right? It's not with
Right.
the,
It's not all the
hey,
other intangibles that we mentioned.
yeah, well, and I just even think I can think of times when I've worked on teams where I was really excited, and I've thought about times when I've dreaded going to work. There's,
Same.
you don't have to be, you know, you don't have to be lucky to guess what my performance was on those teams.
Right.
When you're excited to go to work, you're going to show up in a better way. And when you're dreading it, it's like, great, I roll up and I'm just counting the hours until I can leave.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so sad because, we talked a little bit about the company investment, but the employee investment, right? Your time is valuable. And I think in a lot of ways, modern, workplaces have maybe taught us a little bit that our time is not all that valuable. And so, when you really think about it, I do this a lot now because so now I'm a fractional person trying to run my own business, which is its own podcast. But I have to make choices every day about where I'm going to spend my time. And there are things that like normally I would just say yes to if I'm thinking about my in-house work, have this conversation, have that conversation, that now I'm like, forget about it. I can't do it because this sounds terrible, but it's not worth my time when I have this finite amount of time to do these big things. And sometimes, I don't know, I'm going to have to think about this a little bit more for maybe another podcast or a LinkedIn post. But you talk a lot about ownership at companies and that, leaders want employees to operate like owners. They don't necessarily pay them as, with stock and whatever. But it really got me thinking that if we knew what that meant, because I don't think that when the people that say it know what it means, and I definitely think the employees, when they hear it, don't know what it means. But if we could really distill that down to here's how we like, gone are the repeating meetings just to talk about work. Send me a Slack, post it in the wiki, whatever. Meetings need to be for decisions, or some, high level governance in big companies. But you're back to back to back in meetings, contributing nothing, right? I'm like, send me that PowerPoint, send me that paper, like whatever. Let me form my opinions. And then if we want to get together and have a conversation and or make a decision, let's meet about that. But I think there's just so much administrative overhead that bog people down. Coming back to your point about when you're not into it, it's just hard to get the energy up. We really have to be critical about ourselves in terms of what are we getting from this experience? If we're not growing, if we don't think we're being recognized and rewarded for our contribution, if we found ourselves like sitting in the status quo and it's like, I could be gone tomorrow and they probably wouldn't know it. It is time for a change.
Well, for sure. How do you think, right, as you talk about kind of that overload of just information, and how do you think AI will change that?
Mm.
Obviously, there's a spectrum, right? Like there are, I talked to somebody a bit ago, like, they were still using a fax machine. Like there's a
Really?
spectrum on
Holy
adoption.
cow.
Yes.
Who did they get to maintain that fax machine?
I did not ask. I instead offered to help them learn a different way. But like there's a spectrum, but how do you think AI will change that for people?
Yeah, in so many ways. And I think for this conversation, I'd like to tie what's happening with AI to making sure your people today feel equipped for the future. Because AI is the perfect example for that, right? If you introduce it as a headcount reduction tool, we've seen some of that in the news
Yeah.
media
Oh
recently.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Employees are going to be scared, they're going to be disengaged, they're going to start job shopping. And listen, frankly, in some of those recent news cases, those companies may be wanting to encourage that by making those bold statements about, about people who won't or can't learn AI, whatever their statement is. They're encouraging them to shop. But if you want your people to be committed to you, you need to be committed to them, right? Employment is a quid pro quo, and it's not just about the paycheck. We're always talking about, oh, engagement is so low. And it's like, well, how engaged are you with your people? Right? You want them to be all engaged with you, but what are you doing to earn that trust? And so I think when you position AI as a learning partner, something that can make people faster, smarter, more creative, it can help them thrive. And one of the things that I always tell people is start out small. Even the experts in AI are not really experts, except for the people building the algorithms. Everybody's learning. Everybody's making a ton of mistakes. Like, start with something that's super low risk and super small. We all have that list, right? If I didn't have to spend so much time doing this, if I didn't have to spend so much time doing that, that's been part of our professional worlds for forever. And so you implement some technology, you do some process refinement, whatever. Now AI is just something that can really help you take a big step forward rather than these incremental tweaks. So figure out the thing that is the top of your list that you dislike the most, or that you think, if I could do this faster, it would allow me to get the product out faster, you know, engage with my customers on a much more deeper level. So go do that, get some help from your company, and just start experimenting. I had a client project where we reframed the AI policy around education. So everyone was actively encouraged to experiment with AI in their role. And it shifted the conversation, right? The conversation went from, is this thing going to replace me? To how can this help me get better at what I do? And you know what? Maybe I replace myself, or at least those parts of my job that I really don't like, so that I can move into that higher value space that's always stripped away from the urgency of the day. I was talking to a company recently, and they're a marketing company, and we were talking about AI, and it was actually very sweet because one of the entry level people that was having this discussion with me, we were talking about like recruiting coordination, and that's like a place that's ripe for AI to come in. And she's like, well, I think that means I'm not going to have a job. I said, no, it doesn't mean that. I said, AI can't do critical or contextual thinking. I said, AI doesn't know anything about your company. AI doesn't know about your values. I said, so even as an entry level person, you're there teaching it. You're there learning from it. I learn from AI every time I use it, just by asking a question and not getting the response that you want. And then saying, oh, well, all right, I need to tighten up my questioning. That helps me outside of my AI interaction, because then I'm better at asking questions in my clients. So this whole sort of two-way learning about AI can be super powerful, and it's an inexpensive way for you to start upskilling your workers, helping them become competent in this new, technology that's, growing like crazy. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember, innovation contests, right? Let's get the waste out of the system. We're going Lean Six Sigma. We're doing this. And not that those things aren't great, and they obviously still exist. But now you can sit there with, put your to-do list into your AI tool. Ask it, can you automate any of this? Here's the way I'm doing that. Can you figure out a better way? And you're going to save time. And then when you do that and you shift to all of these fantastic customer interactions, and your boss says, how on earth do you spend so much time with our customers? They love you. I'm like, well, you know, I got rid of all the stuff that was keeping me away from my customers.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the different ways that companies are approaching this. And because some are like, hey, we can scrap all of our people and
Yeah.
right
So
our
let's look at that company a year from now and see how they're doing.
yeah, our kind of my working philosophy is, there's not good culture or bad culture, just useful things and not useful things.
Mm,
And there's some things that I think, okay, it's not useful for a long-term powerhouse of a company to treat people like that as disposable things. What is useful is to have a very high standard of, hey, here we use tools to try to get better. You as a human being who happens to be employed by our company actually aren't valued because of the three things that you know how to do in Excel and the things you do. You're valued because you're a human being and we think that you share our values and are aligned with us and want to create value in the way that we think is useful. And so you're going to evolve with us. And
yes.
that's a way more powerful way for companies to approach using AI, I think, because there are going to be things where, yeah, right now it may seem simple. And I've now seen some examples where I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that does replace a bunch of jobs. If somebody's job is to sit there and look up answers in a knowledge base and tell them that, great. Your job no longer exists because AI can do it better and faster. And like, but that could shift where cool. If the important thing here is that somebody feels valued as a customer, a human interaction probably for some people, right, will be more important than that.
Right.
And there's
Well,
others.
and in the
There's a
meantime,
demographic where
those sorry to interrupt you.
no, you're good.
Those experts need to be the ones training the AI and making sure that they're not getting, garbage out to their customers. So there is at least
Yeah.
a transition point. But if you have someone that's so knowledgeable about your product and your customers that they are the go-to to answer all of these questions, don't you think that they could be doing something else?
Well, for sure, right? And
Yeah.
that's where I think it almost is a accelerant in identifying which companies know who they are and who they want to be and what they're bringing to the world because then they are able to more effectively help their teams figure out better ways for them to apply and create value.
Yeah. If the
And
company
so
is
that's
scaling, the people are scaling, right? Companies scaling. There's opportunities galore when that happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's awesome. I feel like we could talk forever.
I know.
If people want to learn more about what you're doing and follow along, Donna, where's the best place for them to find you and follow you?
Yeah, the best place to find me right now is on LinkedIn, either under Cultivation HR or my LinkedIn handle is very simple. It's just Donna Brown. So no fancy numbers or letters. But when I think about this conversation, I'd actually like to leave people with some practical takeaways, if you don't mind. So I think if you're a leader listening, you want to ask yourself some questions. Do we have the right leadership for the stage we're in? Not just to get the work done, but to help our people thrive. Because there are some people who are not interested in helping anybody thrive, right? They're just doing their thing and they're not good for the culture overall. They should ask themselves, am I introducing AI as a tool for growth and learning or as a tool for fear? We should get that sorted. And do my employees have a clear line of sight between their work and the progress of the company? Because if there's one thing that a leader really needs to do right, it's clarity. Everything else sort of can fall by the wayside if you're clear about the work, if you're clear about the connection, if you're clear about the purpose, if you're clear about the consequences of overperformance and underperformance, then employees have a space in which they can succeed. And if employees are thriving within that clarity, you're not just avoiding the $1 million cost of turnover, but you're creating a culture of growth, loyalty, and resilience, which is needed if you're going to scale your company. If you're an employee listening, I have 3 questions that you should ask yourself, which is, are you stretching yourself out of your comfort zone and trying and learning new things? Because if you're not, you have to. Say yes. Say yes to everything. Every opportunity that comes your way, no matter how outlandish. This is proven time and time again as well in leadership development and other forums, that the most unexpected things come from saying yes to the most outlandish thing that somebody comes and offers you. Ask yourself if the role you're in is igniting your passion and purpose, and then figure out a way to combine those things if possible. And then the third goes back to maybe leadership accountability. Are you getting the support, the encouragement, and the recognition for your contributions? If you're not, that's good information for you to have, because you're always trying to get more information to make the right decision, right? And no one is more invested in your future than you. So don't be a passive passenger in your career development. You've really got to own it. You've really got to take it by the horns and ask for the things you want. Sometimes you'll get something you don't think you want, and it's going to turn out to be the best thing ever.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of my earliest managers that I think about often on how she positively impacted me. Uh, One time I was kind of, you know, sheepishly feeling out, well, what does like, career progression look like here? And she was like, Jacob, nobody will ever look out for your career more than you. Like, don't ever hesitate. Don't think you're being pushy. She's like, I want you to have an amazing career. And as your manager, I'm going to think about myself first. Everybody has to pay attention and take care of themselves. That's great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those things.
This
And,
has been so
and thanks for
fun. Thank
coming
you,
on the show
Jacob.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Well,
Have me
awesome.
back
Thank
anytime,
you.
because I can talk about anything for a half hour. And you've
Sounds
made this
good.
fun, so I should amend that and say I could talk to you about anything for a half hour and have fun.
Oh, that's great. I'm also known for talking a lot. So there's a reason I try to keep these to a certain number of minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Well,
you know
awesome.
what? When you're
Thank you so
fired
much.
up about doing good things, there you go.
That's true. Yeah, this is very true. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Donna.
Thank you.